Hello, everybody. This is Matthew Brower with Frontier Capital Trust. We are going to go live with Javier and Daniel, and we will be talking about a couple of different things, but mainly the Great Reset.
Hot topic. So, any questions that you have, go ahead and send them in, and we'll do our best to take care of everybody today.
And Bear, keep with us. This is our first time, switching over to Instagram, so a little bit of technical difficulties today. But we appreciate all the new follows and the attention that we got from being on Alex Zek's post. He seems to be, from what I've seen, totally in line with the common law vibe. I remember seeing a post from him, a month or two ago about some sovereignty methods he was exploring. I'm not sure if he decided to go another method or maybe using trusts, but I first got, tipped off to them really having some of this stuff dialed in because during the Health Freedom for Humanity conference that was in Kansas City last September, he had a guy on there that was talking exactly the same stuff that we're mentioning as well. I can't remember his name. I did Rob or something. And obviously, this is all spurred on because people were looking at mandates and, regulatory closures of businesses and various, clearly unconstitutional, forceful methods and wondering, like, how did we get into this mess and what the heck can we do to get out of it? So, it's been very interesting to see other people start to kind of also look at the solution. And can we get the hashtag solution scrolling? Can we stop with the doom scrolling and start going towards the solution scrolling? Because if we're going to be organizing on Instagram digitally, we should be spending our time really putting things into a good perspective and having something to work with rather than just freaking out. Looks like we just lost Javier, but I'm sure he'll find his way back in.
Yeah, I agree. It's very important for us to be solution oriented right now. It's like people are really drowning in the kind of overwhelming uh, just propaganda and new laws and pressure that's being put onto people, and we're all aware of it. It's like, we're all aware of the fact that we're getting taxed into oblivion and held down by unconstitutional mandates. So what are we going to do about it? What is the solution? And, I feel very blessed to be doing what we're doing today because we do have a viable solution, at least to protect yourself financially, and to eliminate certain tax liabilities to create like a really bulletproof container around whatever it is that you're doing in the world. So, maybe we can touch on kind of what we bring to the table and how that addresses some of these problems that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I think it'd be good to get into some practical examples too, because, obviously you and I are very active in our community where people since the past 2 years have been looking at ways of, my industry got wrecked, man. I mean, especially being in a liberal city, massage therapy, acupuncturists, which, Asheville is full of these type of practitioners. We got hit really hard, and a lot of us were not able to access benefits due to being independent contractors. It was a huge mess. And so, like some of what I've seen myself trying to navigate through the past couple of years and others trying to navigate through is like, how do I retain my ability to be economically sovereign? Because a lot of us are entrepreneurs, a lot of us are very solution oriented when it comes to navigating, the ebbs and flows of business and the market. We have to constantly adapt and we have to find a way to continue paying our bills and taking care of our families. And so when all of this stuff first started to happen, of course, like what were the major areas, obviously, like I don't consider, what I do to be like the top at the hierarchy of needs, right? Obviously if you can't feed or house yourself, there's no use in getting a massage or any type of healing service. But, what were some of those areas? Obviously the schools. People had a huge issue with the schools and the mask mandates. And so, of course, yes, we can go and fight the mandates and, get into that conflict and go to the school board meetings. I think it was important to do that form of protest, but also too, and I think people have been coming to the realization where we've had losses instead of victories in some of those places, that we might not be able to break through there and, get our way with the masks and the kids and everything else. If we can't be successful there, we've got to move over into creating our own private education. So we saw, friends in our community set up their own wilderness school for all ages and go at that from private membership organization, ministerial organization, using a trust on the back end to protect the finances and putting as many layers as possible. And then, of course, another area is healthcare. Even though the mandates are gone here in Western North Carolina, you still can't really go into most places like a doctor's office and get the service that you want, because even though the mandates are down, the mindset is still conditioned here. And so obviously a big concern for a lot of the women in the community at one point was like, oh, where are we going to go for like our natural alternative home birth kind of situation, as those options were being taken away from them. So it's like, if we really see society going in a diverging path and we want to go in a different direction, we've got to start creating these things ourselves. So food, shelter, healthcare, education, childcare. And so, yeah, like one of the ways that obviously we've been doing that is getting the financial side out of anywhere that could be, exposed to these methods of public legislation. And that's been a huge thing for me in my life, to give me a sense of freedom before all of this crap started happening.
Right. I think that's the boost that most people need. It's like, you want to get into farming, or you want to get into any of these kind of really critical services to kind of pioneer the private side, the new world of, individual rights and freedoms. But you realize that you're fighting an uphill battle. First of all, the constant, like the field that you're working in is probably overpopulated. It's hard to get in competition wise. You don't really have a leg up, and then you're dealing with all of the regulations, all of the taxes, all of the burdens that come along with trying to start a new endeavor. But what happens if you just have a passion for growing? You know where there's a place to grow. You get it set up and protected through a trust. You're set up as a faith-based organization or a charitable service that offers food to the needy or something, primarily, and then that gives you that boost. It gets you your foot in the door so that you can actually begin trying to implement whatever it is that you're passionate about. And that's where, we've seen this with the people that we work with, that, they have this passion, they have some sort of gift that they're trying to offer the world, but they just need that little nudge in the direction. They need a little bit of inertia, and operating through a private trust seems to do that for most people because of the tax savings and the protection and everything that it has to offer. So
Yeah, and ultimately, people joining this conversation with us now, it's like, okay, we've been seeing the problem, we've been looking at solutions. Everybody knows that the more responsibility, and I don't 100% like the word sovereignty, but it's a good enough word that people understand. The more sovereign responsibility we take on, the less that we rely on these outside parties, and the less power and control we give them, the less they have to take away. So if there is this great reset agenda, whether it's a forced conspiracy or whether it's like, it's just a thing that's happening in the world, whatever your belief about it, whatever's going to happen, if we have our own everything, when we have our own roads, our own utilities, our own food, our own schools, like we don't really need to rely on anybody who can take away our privileges based on our compliance. And so this is where we need to start, everybody, whether you end up, whether your skill in this transition time of humanity is in the legal arena or not. Everybody needs to have the basic understanding of what these foundational concepts in law are. You have to understand what is the difference between a statute and a law. What is the difference between the jurisdiction of common law and, commercial law? You have to start to realize all these things, because we take a lot for granted here in America. We get taught about freedom, but also there's this like undercurrent of compliance and authority and like follow orders and do what you're told. And I think some of that comes from, obviously like, America's spiritual and military aspects and parts of the culture where, it's like, don't question the authority figure, right? And so for generations now, we've been in this system where we're like, yeah, we're free, but you have to do what you're told. Otherwise, you can't be free anymore. And so that word privilege, as opposed to rights, inalienable rights, we don't realize that the way that we're born into this system and the way that we operate in it binds us contractually via our consent to giving up those rights and operating as a natural person in common law who is free and, quote, sovereign, if you will, versus a legal person who is titled with citizen, who is titled with taxpayer, who is titled with driver, and all of these other terms that are defined by state legislature, municipal code, and things that we don't directly consent to, but we are implying our consent to. And this is a big thing that people don't realize, that after the Civil War, when the 13th Amendment freed the slaves, the 14th Amendment was the beginning of the top-down federal jurisdiction, federal government. Before, it was the Republic of States, consenting and agreeing to build upwards to create a union, where now we have this top-down entity that controls everything, right? And so the 13th Amendment freed the slaves, and the 14th Amendment put us all under the term of citizen in a federal context. So we have to really understand, the definition of terms and words is different based on what is the context and who is defining it. And so with that 14th Amendment, we are now 14th Amendment citizens who have not inalienable rights, but privileges and immunities. And so people can't seem to wrap their head around, why are they doing all this stuff? It's so unconstitutional. We got to fight this. We got to fight, and we don't know what else to do. So they channel us into these protest movements, which effectively don't feed our communities. They don't, build shelter for us. They attempt to raise energy and noise to get somebody to do something about something. But if we can start to begin to understand these legal definitions and terms, we might realize where we actually do need to take action is in a different playing field than where we kind of get sucked into taking action. So that was a little bit of a mouthful, but I know we have a lot of new viewers who have not digested our content before, and we really need to get these foundational terms on lock so that when we navigate these situations, we can go, oh, I see. They're trying to get me to consent to being in their jurisdiction, and here's how I can navigate that and keep myself outside of it so that they never can claim that I'm under contract to a specific performance, right? A mandate is not a law. We all know that at this point. So how can you compel my performance if we're not contractually obligated? Show me the contract. Show me the proof that I have agreed to do what you're telling me to do. And obviously, in this state of crisis that they keep putting us into with all these crazy events, we're not able to make that logical thing. We're in this like fight or flight. Oh my God, what's going on? I might lose my job. How am I going to do this, that, the other thing? So it's really important for us to take a step back and grasp some of this stuff so that as things get weirder and crazier and whatever is going to happen with this possible great reset stuff, that or whatever the crisis of the day is, whatever the flavor of the crisis of the day is, we really need to kind of keep our heads on us so we can really know what proper actions to take. So
yeah, and then also, maintain perspective, because one thing that's clear is, like, we live in a web, and when that 14th Amendment and the creation of the federal citizen happened, this is a web of artificial entities in which, in their own world, are producing their own powers, their own policies that are named as statutes. So when people are like, hey, common law trusts don't exist or common law doesn't exist, it's like, well, of course it doesn't exist where you guys are operating reality from, because it's truly artificial. A lot of this has actually goes back to the way that currency and value is perceived. Currency was once backed by gold, but it doesn't really have to say anything about that gold is so precious or whatever, but it's that gold is part of the land, and that we are part of the land, and that common sense and common law and the land go together. If we don't separate from our common sense, then we can never be penetrated, we can never be told what to do. But it's because we have given the way for basically the republic to give power to your third parties, entities, agencies. We've deliberately given up our freedoms little by little. Right, and then this is why this is such a prudent time, because we're seeing how technologically, year by year, right, and it's only going to get faster, is that the exponential growth of technology is also going to result in the exponential growth of keeping you in that web, to complexifying the terms to where you can't even move a finger without Big Brother. You cannot own anything, and you've never have. And part of the game, you know, one of the things that we need to also announce the idea of that was put into our brain to think of like, oh, the person does own things, and when it starts to accumulate things, they become liabilities. They become things that are used against you. All we want to do is produce the right form of vehicle for people to go through and be able to move in this web that's complex. But ultimately, you need to, at least the common law world.
Is it my signal that's choppy, guys, or is Javier breaking up?
It's Javier. He's breaking off.
Oh man, that was such good information too.
I know. One thing that you brought up, Daniel, that I really want to drive home on this live is that when we are fighting against these fictional entities, as you said, there's this kind of this illusory corporate world that's been dictating terms from the top down to us. When they do these blatantly unconstitutional things, and we as living beings go out there and we say, hey, stop this, it is that energy that is actually making it real. Whereas if you know in yourself that these things are irrelevant to you, you're a living being, you have constitutional inalienable rights, then you can operate, as we are saying, we can move that energy over to somewhere else where you can start producing something. You can start crafting the new way. You can start opening up those portals for people to move through with your entrepreneurial gifts. Whereas that energy is, right now, it's being wasted. It's every time they do something crazy, it's this treadmill that just next thing comes up, and we just go out and we say, no, we don't want this. It's like, if you don't want it, then you just need to divorce yourself from it. And you already are, in reality, divorced from it. All you need to do is like actualize that and begin to like take steps in your daily life to make it real.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's like, if it were up to me and I'm just one person, like if I was well placed in the movements that are happening, and maybe at some point we'll be able to help people in that way. If I was one of the main organizers of these trucker convoys or something like that, I would be saying, all right, guys, I get it. We want to force the government to change the legislation to affect the rules that apply to us. I don't mean to offend anyone, because I do. Like, God bless the truckers, God bless the protesters. They're trying in their best way to do something. You know what I mean? They're trying in their best way to do something. Their hearts are in the right place. So really, God bless them, because they're at least standing up and taking action rather than sitting and being complacent. But I would have been looking at, who are the main distribution centers and who is standing up for freedom. And just like we had gyms and bars and restaurants that stood up and said, I'm not going to do this, and everyone was able to flock in and support them. Who is that person in the trucking, in the resource distribution, supply chain, logistics, or whatever that industry you want to call it, whatever that position is? Who is that person who's going to stand up and figure out a way to, either restructure into private membership organization or, find some way to keep business as usual going, but stepping out of their jurisdiction? Because that's where this all needs to happen on paper. Essentially, we want them to change the law. We want, to get our representatives to write a new bill or to cancel out an old law or something. Like, really, we don't need another mega bill of like 500 pages of garbage to just go back to the Constitution. It would probably be much simpler for America at this point to just wipe everything out except for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and just like start over again, and work from a clean slate there rather than continually create new legislation. It's like it's out of the right mindset. It's like the head divorced from the body. It's like, yes, we can just continue to create new laws, but it's not grounded into reality. So who is the person in that industry who says, you know what, guys, I've got it. We're going to start our own trucking company. We're going to organize as a private membership association, and we're going to create our own network where we deal with each other as private citizens. Because you have to understand that regulatory bodies and regulations are to protect the public. And it is part of this broader web of commercial law that has usurped common law, in which we have all these rules and we have all these fines and fees and punishments, even though nobody was harmed or hurt in any way whatsoever. So we could step out of that jurisdiction and step into the private, then we're able to still just go about life as usual. And whatever they put on TV, we can just laugh at it at this point, because we know, hey, you know what's good? I got my family, I got my water source, I got my food, I got my housing. We're good. Like, I got everything I need. So whatever, go and destroy the world economy. Like burn the Federal Reserve down, whatever you want to do, let it go to hell. And on a very simple way, I'd say, like, you know, from an energetic, spiritual perspective, this is just like pulling the energy out of the corrupted branch on the tree and letting it fall off and die, and putting the energy into the new branch that's going to be healthy and grow and thrive and survive. If we keep paying the taxes, if we keep paying attention to the news and to whatever the clowns and the politics and all this stuff is, if we keep, you know, spending our time in this, you know, energy, we really are just allowing them to do whatever the heck it is that they want to do. And so that's really why when people come into this work of, like, you know, specifically what we're doing and what we're saying people should do is get back into common law, get into the private sector, start using a trust instead of your person or instead of your LLC, get out of their box. And, you know, this is why we focus so much on this idea of stewardship, because really, like, I think ultimately the three of us would agree, spiritually, whatever your belief is, everything is a result of God's will anyway. And all the bad conspiracy things that are happening are pushing us to stand up and take more responsibility and become good stewards and care for the world and each other. You know, care for the children, the next 7 generations, leave a good world behind. Like, that is the most charitable and equitable and positive thing that we could do to counter all of this. And the more that we stand in our own power and authority under our creator, the less these weird vampire characters like Klaus Schwab, who is a really weird dude, by the way. I don't even think we got into it on the podcast, but there's a picture of him, like, naked at Burning Man with, like, a sparkly top hat and angel wings on, and he is not an attractive man. He is not. It's, like, so weird what these people are into. It's so strange. I can't even justify it by talking about it anymore. But do we really want to let them decide where things are going to go, or are we going to kind of step up and decide that together is my question.
Yeah. Is that next podcast live?
Yeah, the podcast is up. I put it up late last night. I realized you had told me at like 5:30 it was done, and then I waited until like 10 o'clock and realized, oh shoot, I didn't upload it. But it is up there now. We have number 3, the Great Reset. We go into some of that a little bit more in depth.
The links to that are in the bio?
Yeah, the link is in the bio now. Yep, so it's accessible in our Instagram profile as well. Yeah, I'm loving the comments, guys. Sorry, we haven't addressed anybody's comments, but like, thank you so much for.
Well, a couple comments.
I can't actually get them all to show up, but maybe Matt can, because he's
I can scroll through them. Let's see here. We had a while ago. We had main source 777. The common man is in a constant cycle of a Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, so as to create diversion, distraction, and misdirection to all truth.
It's true. That goes back to dispersing the, let's say, the order of a thinking man. Like, there has to be an order to create solutions. And the fact that people are protesting is kind of showing that, hey, this system doesn't work. To be able to take that dispersed energy and concentrate it into direct action rather than just a fuss of thoughts and, you know, extraneous energy.
Yeah, that's what happens, is that we end up with like these protest movements, and it's like, man, it's kind of painful to watch. Like what was the one where the people laid down in the street? They just all got together. It's like the Great Die-Off or something. Like, we have to fight climate change. Look at, you know, pay attention. So like hundreds of people, whatever it was, would lay down in the street and pretend to be dead and, you know, block traffic and all of these things, which, like, I get it. You know, there is a place for raising concern about an issue. But at a point of that person laying in the street, how have they, with their own perception and awareness, validated any of these belief structures that they have about, oh my God, global warming, this, that, and the other? And how have they determined that laying down in the street is actually the solution to that problem? Again, it's like, it's this childish Pavlovian response to our social engineers. They have conditioned us to be this pitiful because instead of taking our families and getting out and growing the food and building the houses and whatever it is we need to do, they have convinced us that we need to lay down in the street and get everybody, force everybody through the power of government to get to agree to make the government do exactly what we want it to do, which is a hamster wheel that will inevitably spin and justify the expansion of this same baloney system that doesn't respect real rights and, is essentially fictitious and meaningless.
It shouldn't even come down. It's almost like an ad for the government, isn't it? When you have a massive display for a protest, it shows how much power they want the government to have to provide a remedy for some invasion or infringement of some right. It's like we talked about those ladies, those feminists who were naked, showing their breasts, right, and they're holding whatever.
For Ukraine. Ukraine.
That's fine. I see the attention, but ultimately, just like any other protest, like pick out one individual and be like, okay, so, what are we doing? What's the solution then? And then they're just going to be like this. At the end, it's going to have to be one person who's in the industry for the cause or whatever that has to take some piece of paper that means something and then gives it to somebody else. And someone says, okay, it's changed. It just comes down to just simple paperwork.
And next up we have Cozy Time Knits, which, it's a very comforting name, Cozy Time Knits. I hope you knit things that somebody can buy, because everybody needs some more hand knit products.
Yeah.
Finally, someone who makes sense. So much energy being spent on what people don't want and fighting to be allowed, quote unquote, into a broken system. This is gold.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I don't think any of us has ever asked anyone for permission. I kind of came out of the womb kicking and screaming and asking tough questions. So I've never been that person to ask for permission, and I've questioned everything anyone has ever told me. Thank God, even though it came with a lot of struggle in my young life. But that's why we have rejected, the traditional routes of learning and seem to gone around that and come to these conclusions well ahead of the events actually happening. I've been learning about this stuff since I was a teenager. I did not actually think it was going to happen because so many years had gone by without anything. And I had heard all about, Alex Jones was saying this stuff in the 90s, man, about, the global prison planet, and they're trying to build a prison and put us all inside. We're going to, global elites. And I knew all about the Federal Reserve. I knew about the money politics. It's all fake and fraudulent. And so now that the things are actually happening, we've already positioned ourselves as being willing to take the risk. I started my first trust almost 7 years ago. And at that time, I did not know enough to know if it was actually going to pan out or not, or if I was putting myself in really hot water. And then I went on to have 4 amazing years building a healing arts ministry and running my entire massage therapy practice and hiring, contractors and building something really great that helped a lot of people and doing it without paying any third party. And so when we talk about these paperwork solutions, it's when you can get your head out of the cognitive dissonance that they've put on us, and you can begin to separate the layers out to say, okay, this is their system and their jurisdiction. This is where the law comes from and our inalienable rights and God. And these are the contracts between that have sort of stuck us together. So most people are living in this weird, everything is everything, and they don't understand the difference. But when you start to pull that apart and really look at things, you can separate yourself from their legal structures, the person, the birth certificate, the social security number, and actual flesh and blood reality, natural person, rights under God. And this is what creates the trust. This person is what creates the trust. It's not in this system. You're not like, please, government, can I have an LLC? Thank you. I'll play by the rules. I really appreciate that. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake on my taxes. Yes, I'll accept all terms and conditions to the fines and have my business shut down. And oh, I can't do this anymore because I won't put masks on. We're never asking for any of that permission to do anything. There are benefits to being in that world. There are certain doors that open and certain doors that close. But essentially, like, we don't have to ask permission to do business with each other, because if two men or women contractually obligate themselves to each other, that's a constitutionally protected right. There's no third party that can come into the trust and say, hey, excuse me, I'm party to this, and so you need to do it this way per me. They're not a party to this contract. It's private. It's between the grantor, the trustees, the beneficiaries, the private parties, to do business as they see fit and contract with each other. And so it really simplifies a lot of things. It's a very quick way to get certain economic strategies started. It's a very quick way to begin receiving financing and donations. And also there's, a veil of privacy and secrecy where this is not required necessarily, depending on your goals, to be registered with the Secretary of State. So Matt put it really great in the video that we're going to launch, hopefully the end of this week. You never see the evidence of wealthy people using private trusts. You see their impressions, and you see sort of like the wake that they leave behind. And, we have very few examples of, one of the most recent, I would say, is Kamala Harris. Javier managed to get that one out of the news. She got a book deal from Penguin Press last year or the year before for $380,000, and that was audited under some congressional review. Javier saw it in the news and scanned through it a little bit, and we saw the audit of the $380,000 went directly into her Kamala Harris and so, whatever her partner's last name is, family trust, right? And so, you're like, okay, well, lots of people have trusts for various reasons. Okay, nothing special. But that trust is listed as a foreign trust. That foreign trust has an address in Los Angeles. So now, as we're talking about separating the layers and looking at legal terms and stuff, you can look at that and go, wait a second, I know my way around these words. That is defined as foreign, yet it has an address on U.S. soil. So what is foreign about it? Well, Kamala Harris and her partner's a U.S. citizen, isn't he? I don't see any reason why there would be, because the one thing we could say is maybe there's a party of the trust that's international or something like that. I don't believe that's the case. But what we assume and what we look at is that foreign trust is not in the context of foreign to the soil of the United States, but it is foreign to the jurisdiction of the corporate federal United States of America. And so they're playing this game. We just don't see but the little echoes of it. And of course, you start Googling this, and you're going to see all the hit pieces from attorneys who say you should never get involved in common law. It doesn't exist. Yet at the same time, they don't really justify their perspective, and they rely on their authority to say, well, I don't know what I'm talking about, and that's a lawyer. So
exactly.
Good thing I dodged that bullet. I would have gotten in a lot of trouble. Meanwhile, you start looking into this, you say, how could common law not exist? Common law has hundreds of years of verifiable proof in law. Like, it's not a fantasy, it's real.
One of the crazy things that I was, and all of this conversation should spark the individual to be more critical and think critically about all this structure, because we like to give the people in the suits and the banks the benefit of the doubt that they know exactly what they're doing. And as I've gotten older and older, I'm realizing that very, very little to no one knows what's actually going on financially, spiritually. All of these things are very important to think about. As I was growing up, right, and this is an honest sentiment, growing up, you're just kind of, I remember being a kid and thinking, I can't wait to be an adult, because I can just, when you're an adult, they take care of things. When you're an adult, everything is kind of fixed. Everything makes sense. And so there I waited, right, until I get older and until things make sense. And I start my inquiry through knowledge, right? I ask my parents what's going on. I ask my teachers what's going on, the reason why they think, the substance of their meaning, their direction. And then I realized that a lot of them are functioning mechanically. that they're actually not really there to question. And this is a big problem because it's led us to where we're at now, into like where we have to, the people who have inalienable rights, have to actually spell out, no, 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 this is what this means. Because just like Daniel said, it's like, hey, oh, you know, we just assume we don't know what we're talking about, but they do. And that's not the case. They have their own like way of saying things. They have their own very unique, exclusive way of defining words. And then you're like, huh, why would they have to be exclusive? Why isn't it just common sense? It's like, well, because they're trying to hide something. And that hiding is an interest that turns into a monetary form of interest that pays out to them. And so then you see how the whole attorney space in the United States has been completely corrupted by this monetary interest, rather than having a just thought about constitutional rights, unalienable rights. And we think about it. You guys should read the oath that sheriffs and our judges take for the Constitution and to uphold the Constitution. It's beautiful. And none of these people are holding out to this. So what does that say about us, having them be so not following their job? Aren't we supposed to hold them accountable? Shouldn't we destroy? Doesn't the Constitution say we can annihilate this government if it's not doing what the people say? Can we not just go back to what these founding principles mean and why? Because then everything starts to make sense of as to why we're here. Like, right, no one really knows why we're here, because technology, all this knowledge and has just completely saturated our minds, where we're almost disoriented. We don't even know where to start. And I'll tell you where to start. Philosophical principles. And then start your way down through the web. And then you'll start to see where you want to stray away from that principle. But then eventually you'll hold on, right? And then as we get older, we start to see that these patterns are useful, and that we can use these patterns like in history, because what other country, what other nation has been as successful as the United States and as free? None. Why? Because of the people. And now we're just turning it over? Like, that's insane. That's all because of a collective few that were scholarly, that took thought as important, as a refined thought, as something that is holy, and then place these things as to make sure that the meaning of whatever is being written out is understood to the other party, right? United States isn't, to me, some racial, some cultural thing. Is do we share the same values and those principles? And if we do, anybody is welcome here. But if you can understand these things on this paper, we have an agreement. And if we don't, then there's going to be a problem, and we're going to have to find a remedy. But until then, we have to reserve our rights that we know we were educated. And that's part of the uphill battle that we're three working on, because it's like, yeah, we can deliver solutions like a trust, and teach you the education about the person, the separation of liability, taxes, and all this stuff. But it comes with responsibility. So, you know, I invite anybody and everybody to open up a trust declaration, but just know that with knowledge, you have responsibility, and that responsibility is for you to act accordingly and righteously, to protect not you, but everybody else in this republic and your fellow man. I mean, God only said, you know, like, this is, other than the golden rule, it's like, isn't that just the most common thing that we can agree on? Why does it have to be more complicated than that? Really shouldn't be. But anyway, let's continue. I think there was a couple more comments, or is that it?
There have been mostly just small affirmations and stuff like that. But I did want to say that, you know, while we have people watching this, I'd like to take the opportunity to just let people know that, like, what we do is we help people. We have an online course, and we also consult with people one-on-one. Take a look at their whole situation, what their goals are, what kind of a business they're in, and then we walk them through step by step how to set up one of these private irrevocable trusts in service to whatever they are doing, usually to maximize privacy, limit the most liability, and get rid of the most tax liability. And so far, we've helped hundreds of people secure, at this point, it's got to be millions of dollars of assets and tax liability. And we have a excellent track record for the people that we work with succeeding in implementing their trusts. And as of yet, we haven't seen one person that we know been involved in this trust work even get so much as a letter acknowledging that the trust exists, let alone a question about the tax liability of some of the hundreds of thousands of dollars that have moved through them. So what we're saying here on this, what we're saying here on this live is not just conjecture. It's there's real principles in law that we have applied in our own direct experience and in our own lives and have benefited greatly from that. And so we are, all three of us, practicing using these private trusts for ourselves, and we're very passionate about being able to offer this to other people. This is kind of like the only thing that we see that's actually a solution to the problem that we're facing, is that people need to take the reins of their own life, move over into the private, stop using that legal person, which, as we said, opens you up to a jurisdiction that you probably don't even know about, and then operate completely and privately with no tax liability, complete privacy, and separation of liability. And Daniel has a really good story about, regarding, we've seen at this point millions of dollars of assets and income move through these trusts, not so much as a letter. And Daniel himself operated his massage business for over 3 years, like 3.5, 4 years, and hundreds of thousands of dollars moved through that trust. Yet he was getting notices from the IRS regarding personal.
Yeah, I have it right here. I'll show you guys, since this is small time. I'm going to stop showing this to people at some point. I'm going to frame it and hang it in the office. But and there needs to be a note walking into this, because the reason why we spend so much time with everyone and we try to really focus on the education is because when you start getting interested in this, quote, sovereignty concept, or even just administering your own legal affairs and trying to separate yourself from implied contracts and stuff, there's so many rabbit holes to go down. There's so many people who are talking theory and conjecture but have no proof of what they're saying actually works. You might find yourself going, I'm going to fight this traffic ticket. Yeah, this makes sense. I'm going to fight it. I get it. I'm not the person. I wasn't driving in commerce. I was traveling. That's my right. And then find yourself in a long and drawn out experience and battle that is more than you bargained for. So, each of us have had to run in with the gurus and the magic paperwork solutions. And there's been a lot of bullshit out there. There's absolutely places you can go, because as soon as people realize that this is valuable, they themselves often try to resell it. So we see people putting out there, thousands of dollars for the paperwork with no support, no explanation. And this stuff is only as good as your knowledge of this, environment of law that we're talking about. Like, you can be a trustee on paper, but then absolutely be irresponsible with your affairs, expose yourself to tons of liability. So of course, when people hear us talk about this, it's like, yes, out of the system. I don't want to pay anymore. This is great. But we're not there yet completely. Some of you may be. Like, if you already are wealthy, you can shift over to being a Rockefeller trustee, own nothing, control everything. You're good to go. Most of us are still working people, and we're not at the place where we can go out and pay cash for a home. So we need to balance and have one foot in both worlds. But some of the things that are fun that have happened, and I am one that has dived straight into the deep end. I got rid of my personal bank account in 2016 when I signed my first trust. I've had nothing to my name, except every now and then a vehicle would be in my name for a little while if I didn't want to put it in the trust right away or whatever. But I particularly, I told some of my story. If you guys are watching my story on my Instagram, it's probably still up from yesterday. But I told my stories. Like, I first got into tax protest before I learned about trusts. And so I was at a place in my life where I had very little to lose. And so I said, you know what, I'm drawing my line in the sand. And so 2014, originally, I was an independent contractor. I worked in multiple states, working in the organic food industry, doing trade shows, working for restaurants and farms and stuff. And I had not a much. I probably made less than $30,000 that year, but they wanted their cut of it. So it was a $4,000 or $5,000 tax bill. And so I just figured, hey, you know what? I'm off the grid. Let's just, play with these guys a little bit. And I knew enough that not to respond to the letters. That would be an admission of my consent, an admission of a contract, acceptance of the terms. So I would just, my poor mom, she'd, Dan, you're getting letters from the IRS. Are you sure you took care of this? Oh, that's so strange, Ma. Just send me the letters. I already sent the checks. They must be confused. Send me the letters. I'll take care of it. And then I would get them. She'd mail them to me, and I'd just throw them in the trash and wait a few more years for them to send the next letter. So God bless my mom. And so I watched that, because at that point in my life, the first 2 years, I did not have my trust set up. I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not paying the tax. I'm done. I'm just not going to do it. And then in 2016, I signed the trust, and I started really understanding, even if they wanted something from me, they can't get it, because the way that this is set up, it's irrevocably anything I'm operating. I'm the trustee now. That's not, Daniel's money anymore. That's the trust's money, and I'm operating the trust for this specific purpose. They don't have a claim over that, and there's many layers as to why. So I had the really fun experience of, at first I had my $4,000 or $5,000 tax bill. A couple of years later, it resurfaced. It was $600. And now I will show this to you guys. This is not going to be shown to everybody anymore. I'm going to hang it up in my office. This came through during the pandemic BS in 2020. Sir, don't forget to take care of your outstanding 2014 tax bill. You owe us. Maybe you've already sent a payment in $73.13. So I got myself in a position of strength and had the upper hand, and watched them try to negotiate with me for as much as they can get. And you might think at this point, well, it's only $73. I might as well take care of it. But this, if you respond to this letter, you're entering into consent. You're validating that you accept the terms of this by your actions. So you would never, if you truly were free of this obligation, you would never take it seriously, unless it's, obviously the bigger a fish you are, the more they wish to fight with you. But this is why, setting yourself up properly to begin with is how you get into tax avoidance as opposed to tax evasion. And if your straw man, your legal person never takes a personal income, then you will not have a personal income tax liability. And Cozy Time Knits, no, I don't think they're going to take me to jail for $73. And also, they don't really have a claim over it. And I don't know if maybe, Javier, you could substantiate that with a little bit more information. And obviously, like I said, if there's what their immediate action steps would be, because there's no more debtors prisons. They don't have debtors prison anymore. What they would do,
Well, just to say this, before they take you to jail, you have to understand. And you just don't understand. Every single officer will say, like, do you understand? And then your response is, no, I don't. And then they cannot do that. They cannot take you physically to jail unless they have some actual warrant. But they still ask you if you understand. Excuse me, if you understand. Because that's a form of consent. Because if you don't, they have to make you understand, or else it's literally unconstitutional. They would have to bring up, well, who's the damaged? Where is the Internal Revenue Service? Where's Mr. Revenue Service? Can he present? Oh, it's an authorized agent. Oh, does he have rights? Oh, it's a corporation. A corporation versus, oh, okay. It's a very interesting dynamic. And just so that people understand, like, the IRS they do all the proceedings in admiralty. Like Daniel just said, like, as soon as they give you a paper, they're wanting for you to, like, touch it and open it or respond to it, because then it starts a clock for them. And they're like, okay, now we have options as to what we can do. And if you don't, they're just going to send you, like, oh, well, yeah, you can't pay $5,000. So can you pay 4? Okay, you can't pay 4. You can't until it's like 73 cents. And it's like, well, where was that money in the first place? Did that money even exist?
Yeah, and I'll also add that if he were to be working a W-2 job, have a personal bank account, some personal assets in his name of his legal person, since that's what they're making the claim against, they're making a claim against the legal person, not Daniel himself as a human being. And so if he had a W-2 job where, his legal person was contracted to make that income, they could at that point, if you decide not to pay it, come in and hook up with your employer and say, hey, his wages are garnished now. That legal person owes us money. So the double threat here that we're seeing is that you get your assets and your income out of the legal person's name. You render it basically lame. It sits there. It doesn't really do anything. It maybe has good credit, but other than that, it owns nothing. And the trust becomes the main vehicle through which you do all of your commercial activities. Which, I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, that the trustee can use trust resources to pay for his personal expenses. That's completely well within the rights of a trustee to do. A lot of people think, a trust, oh, you put money over there, it stays over there, you don't get to use it, there's a lot of rules, a lot of red tape. It's actually quite flexible. And so you can switch your income stream over to the trust. It becomes non-taxable because it's not income, it's generating wealth for the benefit of the beneficiary. So it's hard to wrap your mind around. Once you see all the little pieces, it starts coming together. We had another comment here.
And
how long does it take to basically terminate an active LLC and move into a trust? I want to do this. I feel we are a perfect industry to do this, as well as it fits our ideas on stewardship. I'd love to connect offline. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was going to say, so this is what I wanted to preface as Matt was talking to is that, ideally, when it comes to us, I took a huge risk doing this as I was learning, right? I am more comfortable putting myself in that situation of risk, especially with someone like the IRS, because it's my life. And if I screw up, I have no one else to blame. But we have seen now that we've helped other people do this over the past couple of years, and we're into the hundreds of different situations and applications. Some have more to lose, some have less. Some have stronger moral and ethical motivations. Some are a bit more conservative and want to play, by the rules as much as possible. All of this stuff is about setting things up properly before there is a problem. And if you do that, you're good to go in most situations. Obviously, we don't want anyone that we talk to, we don't want to bear the karma and responsibility of, you intentionally creating more trouble for yourself. So we don't recommend that anyone get in this situation with them. Best to set things up properly ahead of time and never have to worry about receiving a letter from anybody. Because what the action steps, while we don't have debtors' prisons, what they would try to do is lien your property. They'd put a lien on your house. They could try to repossess a car or something of that nature. Or if you're W-2, they could garnish your wages. We had a friend here. It wasn't the IRS, but it was the State Department of Revenue. And her partner, her husband, set up an LLC and then, neglected it in some way and didn't realize that he owed back taxes. And she woke up one day 6 months later with their savings account emptied because both of their names were on the account, and the State Department of Revenue was authorized to go in and just debit the money from them. So these are situations in which we have to take a lot of time and energy with you guys to make sure that you're not just we're not trying to be the false guru here and say, here's the magic silver bullet paperwork. It's going to solve all your problems. Here you go, tax free. It's not like that. When we have an alternative system built, when we have security and resources to where we don't have to operate in their world at all, it'll be a lot easier to say, you know what, screw it. I'm not ever going to answer the letter ever again. Right now, we have to look at this practically and see a foot in both worlds. So some of you may be in situations where you can fully utilize everything now. Others may be it's a couple years out goal to get where you want to go. And so we have to look at that on each thing. And so that was the preface to the actual question as to, if you already have an LLC, you may be on the hook for some of that. Obviously, set things up now if you can, and then plan your transition over, tie up your loose ends rather than just saying, I'm going to get rid of this and screw it. I won't pay the $10,000 I owe, because that's a decision you have to make. If you want to fight more battles, if you're ready and you want to learn this stuff and you want to move forward, we don't advise those things. We'll tell you, here's what's on the table. Here's your, it looks like you've already incurred some tax liability. You have the option of tidying that up and moving forward and restructuring this way. Or, if you decide to flip them the bird, here's maybe what you might be looking at down the road someday. Yeah. So be informed of that decision. We're not here to rush anybody into anything. We take a lot of care with everybody because, you know, like I said, for us, we maybe feel passion and integrity and morality that we should take some risks to fight the fight, as you will, but we're not going to take those risks on your behalf. And so it seems like a couple more questions came in while we were talking about. So
yeah, we got one from main source 777. How about those W-2 earners that donate 100% of their income to nonprofit 508c1a? Any upside come tax time?
Yeah, so 508c1a is a determination. It's not a determination. It's an exception to the rule for what you would have to qualify for 501c3. 508c1a is the exception to the rule, is for faith-based organizations, churches, integrated organizations within churches, and conventions of, you know, religious organizations. And so you can apply 508c1a to an LLC or to a trust or whatever. And so, you know, obviously 508c1a may protect your tax liability under a spiritual or religious context, which we advise if somebody's going to claim 508c1a, you should actually believe that and be that and have that spiritual conviction, so that there's not a misalignment of reality with what you're claiming on paper. And you can't do 100% of your income, but you would be able to write off a substantial portion of that. I believe it's between 40 to 60% of your adjusted gross can be written off at the end of the year. So if you submit a new W-4 and you figure out what the calculation is based on your hourly wage or whatever, you might be able to get a little bit more of your paycheck every week, or you may be able to get a huge return at the end of the year based on that donation. So that's a little bit about 508c1a. That's another topic probably for another time. And then I see Celestia Angel has a question about Canada. We have had some people who have applied, you know, who have done a little bit of extra research and modified our documents to Canadian law. But also we have found a way for, just as if you were going to register a corporation in the US, you can get an ITIN number as an international citizen, and you can actually begin to structure your affairs with the trust in the US. But that's going to require a little bit of extra legwork. You're going to have to, you know, go to the consulate for the notarization. You're going to have to get, you know, you can pay monthly for an address somewhere in the States where you can operate from, receive your mail there, and you're going to have to get a registered agent to do various aspects for you. Javier could speak a little bit more about the international aspects. I know he put that part of our program together for those who are not in the States. But it seems pretty much that if you can get an ITIN number, you are good to go. But I could let him expand on that.
No, yeah.
Cozy Time Knits, we'll save it for you. We'll save it.
Yeah. So the ITIN number is to be able to basically apply for the EIN number. And so once you get your ITIN, and we have a diagram inside our course and stuff that kind of walks you through to make sure you can get your EIN. But it's really, it's a simple process, but you hit it right in the nail. Now, sole proprietor here. Okay. That's easy. Hey, Danny, can you hear me still, Daniel?
Yeah. Sorry, I spaced out a second. I was checking the time. We're just at about an hour, but it seems like we've got some engaged people. So I don't know if anybody.
I'm just gonna do a couple comments here, just because I want to touch on the last thing that you said before this last thing you said, actually, which was abandoning ship, you know, which is like, hey, you can abandon whatever your person is doing or whatever, but this is why we emphasize working with us, because we're going to take your assessment seriously. We're going to see all the pieces, and we're going to cater so you can strategize, because it's not just like, oh, you just leave everything and you know, see what happens. It's like, sure, you can do that, but the way you can actually abandon ship is something that's also structured. It's a way that it has to be, I guess it has to be anticipated on how it happens, so it's controlled. So, okay.
Daniel, you said we're coming up at about an hour?
Yeah, I mean, we're just at the end. I don't know if anyone else has any questions or anything, but essentially, you can find our content. We're still getting our grip of Instagram Lives and various stuff. We're trying to get it all under one platform. We do still use Facebook and YouTube. We don't have a huge following right now, and so we're pretty clandestine when it comes to not triggering the algorithms for censorship and stuff. So you can find us on most major platforms. We're going to probably start using Instagram a bit more since we've got such a good response from it. But yeah, essentially, it's like we could talk about the Great Reset stuff a little bit more. I mean, whatever their strategy is to damage the purchasing power of our currency or to, put us into default. Like one of the things I think I mentioned in the podcast yesterday was I have a concern about all the SBA money that was sent to small businesses because there are people who got quite a bit of money from that, and anything over $25,000 came with a guarantee of your business assets. And that could easily bleed over into your personal assets if you're not separated well enough. I mean, I'm sure people who are operating LLCs and corporations have enough understanding of how to protect themselves from their business liabilities. But at the same time, anything could happen at this point. And so if a majority of America's small businesses are, subsisting on SBA funding, EIDL and the PPP and all of that stuff, and all of a sudden the economy super tanks, now we're in a position where they've just escalated things another step on the chessboard here. And all this supply chain stuff is going on at the same time. So, from what we know about Klaus Schwab, the Great Reset, Vanguard, BlackRock, and all that stuff, they're also buying up property. And so if their goal is to have us to own nothing, they've got to have, I would anticipate that their plan includes trying to figure out how to get all of the property. And so how does that happen unless they, create some massive economic situation in which we can no longer pay our mortgages? In that situation, even if in terms of currency and income, they move us all over to blockchain and cryptocurrency and whatever, even if that's the way that the monetary system goes, I think in that situation, a trust would still be extremely important, because if you need to hit the emergency brake and protect whatever your land, your house, your farmland, or whatever that is, your vehicle, putting that into the irrevocable trust and creating that firm division from whatever liabilities your person has is going to make it almost impossible for them to get that from us. And so I think, whether we take this whole Klaus Schwab character in the World Economic Forum seriously or not, it would behoove us all to look at whatever possible chess moves we can make at this time. And no matter how, we can't predict how things are going to go. I mean, they're kind of telling us their vague plans for things, and we can kind of see that the writing is on the wall. And ultimately, to get back to the idea of all of this is ultimately happening for good, to motivate us to rise to our, to take the seat of power under God in our divine alignment. We need to rise up to take stewardship of what God has given us. We have to take stewardship of the land and the resources. And so it's kind of funny, and we've been commenting on this in our material, is they keep saying this, own nothing and you'll be happy. But we're going to counter that with the Rockefeller slogan, own nothing and control everything. And either way, like Javier pointed out earlier, ownership is a myth. We don't own anything here. We don't get to keep our bodies. We don't get to keep our possessions. It's all going to be left behind for somebody else at some point.
We do have a couple more questions, by the way.
At that point,
Yeah. So
whether we, sorry, continue.
Just have a couple more questions. I think we want to get to those before we close. Emily Reynolds,
I want to
WBFF Pro says, what would this look like for someone who runs their own business and takes mostly cash? So, I mean, it's fairly simple, actually. You just have your trust set up, either name it similar or something to what you're already using, or use a DBA with your current branding information, use the trust as the commercial container in the background, and you just, all of the money that comes in, rather than depositing it to a personal bank account, it goes straight into the trust account, and it's separate and protected. It's very straightforward in that case. It doesn't really matter that you're taking mostly cash, because it matters where it's going to interface with a third party, and that's at a bank. As soon as it goes into a personal account, that's a tax liability. Technically you get lots of cash. They're going to want to claim that you owe a liability on that, but it's kind of hard for them to prove how much cash you're getting. So it's fairly simple and straightforward in that case. And then we have another question from Emmeline K. Rose. I just heard from my bank today that I can't take a huge sum out of my account without an invoice as to what I'm going to do with the money. Without that, they will cancel my account and IRS is involved.
What bank is
state are
this?
you in, Emily?
I'm going to give.
Yeah, what bank and what state are you in? Is that California?
Yeah, that's insane.
It sounds like California, New York, or something.
California or New York, yeah. If you could let us know, that would be.
There's another comment. I don't know if it's a question, but it says if you have a mortgage, the bank owns your home, not you. Kinda, but because a mortgage company is still a corporation, they don't own anything. Whatever they are is almost like a DBA for a larger conglomerate that's usually a trust holding company. And this trust holding company, like there's one called Deutsche Bank that owns a lot of the property here in Florida. They don't actually own it because they're a corporation that's claiming rights to real property. And so they cannot actually go to the courts to produce a remedy because they're a corporation. They only have relative rights. So their existing title, honest to God, is actually null and void by the Constitution. So actually, nobody owns any of the property. It's only presumed to be owned by somebody just because of the ownership of the title. And even if you look up the definition of a title, they'll tell you it's even conceptual form of ownership, which should terrify the people as to what they're getting into, especially with the mortgage. Local bank, upstate New York, Bank of Green County.
A follow-up question from Emily Reynolds, which is, are there certain banks that you recommend to open this trust? Thank you. And to that, I would just say that typically the larger banks, most people kind of have reservations against dealing with them, but they are the ones who are historically used to setting up trust accounts. They have somebody in-house usually that does this on a regular basis, whereas, the credit unions and the smaller local banks, they may, only open up one trust every couple of years. They may even bring in somebody from a different branch just to handle that because they don't really do it all that often. So we found that we generally have good success with the larger banks. We have had a couple of issues in New York with, I believe it's Chase. They're just kind of throwing up, they're going through an interim phase with implementing the Uniform Trust Code. So there's some technicalities and stuff getting in the way there. But typically any bank that's, well equipped and established and has somebody in-house that can, deal with trust is no issue at all. So
yeah, let's go back to Emmeline's situation about.
She says upstate New York, Bank of Green County.
I mean, my first thought to that is to say, where in the service agreement did I agree to that? Right. where give me a copy of the service agreement and the terms and conditions. Because, I mean, ultimately, I guess at that point, you want to figure out how quickly you can get your money out of there. So maybe you wire transfer, maybe you say, hey, I've got another bank account. Because ultimately, what the answer should be is it's none of your goddamn business. This is my property and you're holding it. It's not your money, it's my money. And so we have a problem here. And you're going to show me where I agreed to give you that constraint because I didn't agree to that. So please provide, the service agreement here so I can see exactly how you can. So this is what we all need to start getting good at doing. How can you compel my performance without my consent, especially when it comes to your own property? So, you may want to be tactful and be wise and, play it like a chess game and try to get that information from them in a courteous and kind manner. Oh, okay, that's the rules. By the way, could I just have a copy of the service agreement? Because I'm really curious, what I've signed up for by banking with you. And, I think a lot of these banks will feel pressured by economic threat of, I'm going to move to another bank. How dare you? But obviously we don't want to blow our top on the first chess move and spill the pieces all over the floor. And the strategic way around this may be, you know, taking a chunk out of the bank at a time and moving it over to your trust account, which, sure, get the IRS involved. It doesn't matter, because they're going to see you made a donation to your own private irrevocable trust. And so what? You know, you granted that in there. A grant is not, you know, that's, you've already paid tax on that money probably. Well, I guess if you're cash business, you may not have, but they would be under the assumption that you had. And so, man, that really sucks. And thanks for letting us know about
this
that
is the issue
specific bank.
with this is the issue with personal bank accounts, because what a lot of people don't realize is that your personal bank account is a result of your Social Security connected to a resulting trust. So in fact, all personal checking bank accounts are all essentially trust accounts that are connected with your Social Security. And so this is why they can pull sly tricks like this and even defend their case by doing something obviously just unconstitutional, completely illegal. Yet we're sitting here like, oh, you know, even contemplating how nicely we're going to talk, like these people should be eviscerated from doing business for ever doing that. Lived in the area for 40 years and had several businesses over that time. And then this is how they thank you, you know?
I'm just time check, guys. We have got a 3 o'clock consultation. And so I don't know if you want to take a break in between now and then, but if you want to take a break, we probably should wrap it here and get a little food in us before the consultation.
And so in closing, I think it'd be great for everybody who their ears perked up and they decided to check this out. Go ahead and go to our YouTube channel or our Facebook page. All of our previous lives are up there, I do believe, at least on the Facebook page for sure. And I know our other ones and our first 2 podcasts are on our YouTube channel. So we also have several clips that we've cut up from little poignant slices from each of the live streams. So if you don't have an hour to sit down and watch the whole live, just go ahead and check out some of those clips. That we really try to disseminate as much information as possible whenever we do this. So otherwise, we are working on a new landing page, but as of right now, we have courses.frontiercapitaltrust.com/findfreedom that has a video done by Javier where he drafted a document explaining all of the nuts and bolts behind the scenes, how the stuff works, why it works. And then we also have a sign-up thing for our free PDF, Principles of Trusteeship, which again is just another mind-blowing resource of information that explains how trusts work, why they work, how the tax laws are set up, why the trust can do what it can do. And then you can also sign up for our application there as well, which is just a couple questions, give us a little understanding of where you're at, what your goals are. And then one of us will reach out to you and set up a time to talk. We can go over everything that our course has and what our consulting can do, how we can help you reach your goals. So thank you, everybody.
We have to strike a balance between overwhelming amounts of information and breaking it down bit by bit. So if at any point, and we're updating things currently, so there's going to be, Principles of Trusteeship is in the process of being revised and broken down a little bit more. So at any point, if you're feeling overwhelmed and this is out of your, comfort zone, or it's just making your head spin, that's a good time to just either write us an email or, fill out an application and get on the phone with somebody. It'll usually be me. I can talk to you on the phone and usually clear some things up directly, because each one of you is in a different situation with a different learning style and a different amount of this knowledge already embedded in you. And so we have to take that into account. But yeah, we're ready to go full speed on this. The new follows from Alec posting, pinning our comment the other day, and we do really feel strongly that this is going to be the legal container for these communities that we all know need to be built, where we focus on growing food and raising our families and our children and coming up with our own resource secure network. So we want to participate that with you. We always say that our clients are the new earth builders. So if you are a new earth builder, we will make this make sense to you enough and support you enough that you can begin utilizing this for yourself to accomplish your goals. So thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. Much gratitude.
Take care, guys.
All right, blessings, guys. Thank you very much.